Hello, I have the honor of being the last speaker, so I'll try to make this as less painful as possible. Learning how to learn with software carpentry. When we started the SoundSoftware project, one idea that was fundamental for this project was the idea of reproducible research. I'm not going to talk a lot about this because it's already been mentioned, and I'm sure that most of you are aware of what reproducible research is. But its basic idea is that research nowadays, for research to be the most important thing about research is not only the paper but also the software and the data. So the software and the data should also be available for other researchers to be able to build upon your research. And when we started the project, we conducted a survey we carried out a survey in the UK audio and music related institutions, where we asked who developed software and about their practices of developing software. And we found out that 82% of the people that answered this survey said that they developed software, but only 39 of those took any steps towards reproducibility, and of those that took any steps towards reproducibility, only 35% published any code. What does this mean? This means that 11% of the people, only 11% of the people that tried to be reproducible published any code. And obviously this raised some questions. Why don't people publish more code? Many of these reasons have already been talked about today. Our survey suggested perhaps lack of time, copyright restrictions. Some people actually believe that the software they have been working in has potential for future commercial use. There was a similar study done by the UK Research Information Network back in 2010 that pointed out that there was a lack of evidence of benefits on publishing code. There is also, we don't like to admit it, but a culture of independence and competition in the research institutions. And a very interesting one that has already been pointed out, there are quality concerns. Many of the researchers are self-taught programmers, and they have strong feelings about showing their code to other people, of opening their code to the world. After this survey, we identified 4 barriers that prevented the publication and reuse of research software. In this talk we are going to be focusing on the last one, but just in a quick way. The barriers were the lack of facilities and tools. There weren't enough facilities and tools available for the researchers, or the researchers weren't aware that they existed. There was a lack of incentive for publication. Remember, the publication of software. Platforming capabilities are a common problem. Software developed for some versions of MATLAB many times doesn't run in newer versions of MATLAB, etc. And most importantly, and the one I'm going to be focusing on this talk today, is the lack of education and confidence with code. As I mentioned, many people are self-trained programmers, so they actually lacked confidence with the code they were producing. So, in the beginning of the project, after conducting this survey, analyzing this survey, we came across Software Carpentry, which is a volunteer organization that was started back in '98 by Greg Wilson in Canada. And the mission statement of Software Carpentry basically says that Software Carpentry helps researchers being more productive by teaching them basic computing skills. This sounds simple, but basic computing skills can be a very wide concept. It's currently funded by the Sloan Foundation and by the Mozilla Foundation. And how does it work? Basically by having online resources freely available, freely downloadable, such as video lectures and presentations, and more importantly, by conducting workshops and boot camps. I will be explaining a little bit more about workshops and boot camps later on this presentation. So, in November 2010, we decided to organize our first workshop with software carpentry. It was a one-week workshop in London. We invited Greg Wilson to fly from Canada to come and teach in this workshop. It was a workshop that lasted from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day, from Monday to Friday, a week then. We contacted the research groups in the UK doing audio and music research, asking them to select 1 or 2 PhD students to attend this workshop. We were especially interested in students that were starting their PhDs because we believed that they could be the ones benefiting from such a workshop, benefiting more from such a workshop. And it was a workshop that emphasized on live coding. Greg was basically typing as he was speaking. Many group exercises. People were organizing themselves into groups of 2 or 3 people, and they were doing software exercises throughout the workshop. The syllabus was, I don't exactly remember the syllabus, but I do remember that we spent 1 day doing Python, at least half a day doing Bash, Shell, etc. We did some databases, SQLite, if I'm not mistaken. We did unit testing. We did version control, Subversion. I think we also did graphical user interfaces. And yes, it was autumn school for audio and music researchers. So in the last day, one student actually did a little bit of audio processing in Python. That was the only audio content of the whole week. But yeah, as you can see, yes, this was a very, very, very comprehensive and intensive workshop. We actually did a post-workshop survey 6 months after the workshop, 6 to 8 months if I'm not mistaken. 40% of the people, so 9 people actually answered the survey. And all the people that answered the survey said they liked the workshop format, and 33% of the people actually considered it to be excellent. And the vast majority said that it would be important for their future, and they would recommend it to fellow researchers. But yes, and I've got some comments here in my comments. Some comments that we found on the survey. Thanks, I'm still enjoying the benefits of the workshop. This was an excellent course which I wouldn't hesitate to recommend to any PhD or any fellow PhD student, etc., etc. So we had lots of very good feedback. At the same time, by the end of the week, or by half of the week, we came to understand that this was not a sustainable model. Why? It was extremely tiring for both the instructor and the participants of the workshop. We are talking about starting at 10 a.m. each day and learning new software skills and doing software exercises the whole day through 5 p.m. and restarting the day after. This during the whole week can be extremely fatiguing. Also, we only had 1 instructor, so Greg's voice was actually going worse and worse and worse during the workshop. Some people know, I'm not sure if someone from this workshop said this, but someone once said that it can be more wearing than enlightening to be part of such an experience sometimes. Also, for a PhD student, it's not always easy to take a week from your PhD. Even if you are a first-year PhD student, it's not easy to take 5 days off to learn more software skills. For the SoundSoftware project, for us, it was also an expensive experience because we had to fly Greg over from Canada. Most of these students were from universities that are not in London, so we had to put them in an hotel, etc., etc. So yes, we came to realize that this was not a very sustainable approach to teaching these kinds of software skills. So a new approach was thought. Greg, the organizer of Software Carpentry, restarted or started a new iteration of Software Carpentry in 2012. And what was the major change? Instead of doing long duration workshops, he started organizing short duration workshops. So the workshops would now last for only 2 days. What was the main idea behind this? So shorter workshops, more people could attend them. And if more people could attend them, the word would spread faster, more people would become helping out, more people would be interested in becoming instructors, etc. Also, in smaller workshops, it's easier to retain what is learned, or at least we hope that it's easier to retain what is learned. It's easier to focus during 2 days than to keep focus for a whole week. And so, also, yes, of course, if we are organizing 2 days instead of 5, some subjects had to be dropped. So a typical syllabus of a software carpentry workshop nowadays looks like this. So we start usually with Unix shell, where students can get the grips with pipes, loops. Scripting is basic. These are the basic concepts: how to use pipes to run an instruction, how to put everything in scripts, record, reuse, etc. Then we jump to Python. It's an easy jump after the console. You just start working on Python. Some people use IPython, which someone already mentioned today. Where the most important things to grasp, the most important concepts to grasp, is the concept of functions, reuse codes, make your code simpler, make your code adhere to some standards, variable naming, etc., etc. On day 2, we teach version control. Sometimes we teach this on day 1, but yes. Which is fundamental, and the main idea in version control, why is it different from using Dropbox or from sending emails to oneself, for instance? We tend to focus on version control as a cooperative tool to work with others, and we tend to focus that it's fundamental for reproducibility, to know which version of your work was submitted, when it was submitted, how it was submitted, etc. Testing. We usually have a module on testing, but testing is something that is taught throughout the workshop. So we're not only talking about unit tests or test-driven development. We are talking about making sure that while you're writing a program, that the program is behaving as you expect. And if you have oracles in your computer, let's say, to keep testing your program against those oracles, so that you make sure that you are that you are doing what you think you're doing. And eventually we end up with either databases or number crunching, NumPy. So a little bit more concrete material. And yes, as you can see, from the difference from this kind of bootcamp to the 5-day bootcamp we did before, we dropped things such as graphical user interfaces, which are not useful in which are not that useful for researchers, I would say, usually. And so as I was saying, this version of Software Carpentry was launched in January 2012, and it was a huge success, or it's becoming a huge success. So these are some figures from, I hope you can read this, so from January 2012 up to May 2013. And these are worldwide figures. So there have been 92 workshops so far in this 1.5-year period, in which more than 100 instructors have participated. An important note, all the instructors of Software Carpentry are volunteers, so they are doing this because they do believe that this is a good way to teach peers and to help peers. And software carpentry has reached more than 3,000 students. What has happened in the UK? In 2012, when Greg started this new iteration of software carpentry, the SSI became involved and is now the main responsible of organizing boot camps in the United Kingdom. So in the United Kingdom so far, there have been, since the beginning of 2012, more than 12 boot camps in at least 10 institutions, and around 400 people have attended those boot camps. We have actually collaborated in the first two boot camps that happened in the UK. We had one in the UCL and one in Newcastle, one in April and one in May. In the UCL one, we actually had a team of 4 students from the Center for Digital Music attending. And we helped in these boot camps mostly because we were interested in how this new iteration of software carpentry could also be useful for us. We also helped creating and delivered content in these boot camps, namely for version control. After this experience, we organized a second boot camp for audio and music researchers. This time it was organized in York, because there was a digital audio, the DAFX conference happening in York, so we thought it would be a good idea to co-locate the boot camp with a major conference in the field. So the boot camp happened last year in September, and we like to change things, so we did a 3-day boot camp. Instead of the typical 2-day boot camp, we organized a 3-day boot camp. The first 2 days were typical software carpentry, just like I explained, I showed a little bit earlier. And then we had a last day in which we invited Code Design to help us deliver that day. And that day was an audio day in which we basically tried to use the concepts of modularity, reusability, and version control and testing, and apply them to audio development. So we were using Python and some libraries in Python, and people were doing spectrograms and stuff like that. It was quite interesting. Actually, I do think that it was the most the part of the workshop that people liked the most. So in that bootcamp, we had 26 attendees from 8 different institutions. One even came from Amsterdam. I think he was going for DAFE. He was going to attend the Digital Audio Conference, so he came a few days earlier. After that, we organized a few more events. So we had 2 internal boot camps in Queen Mary. Both were 2-day boot camps following the structure of typical structure of the software carpentry. We had a Media and Arts Technology boot camp and a boot camp for the C4DM students. Using the material we created for software carpentry, we delivered a tutorial at Izmir conference. Izmir is a conference I think most of you know. It's a conference, a very important conference on MIR, which happened in Porto last year, and we did a tutorial on testing, test-driven development in audio. And we have something planned, which we still don't know what it's going to be, but we are going to deliver a tutorial as well in the next AS conference, which is happening in London in January, so it's just around the corner. From all this, what do we get? We get some good feedback. So usually in the end of each bootcamp, we ask the participants to give us either good or bad feedback. And usually a very common answer, or an answer that is always there, is that the bootcamps have a very good atmosphere and people feel comfortable asking stupid questions. And I can understand that, because the bootcamps are very informal and people are We actually like people to participate as much as they can. Also, given that the bootcamps rely heavily on live coding, people also do like that, because yes, live coding is doing mistakes in a live way, so it's always good to see someone that is supposed to be teaching making the same mistakes as you would do. All the people also like the fact that all the lessons and all the content is downloadable. Actually, in the autumn school that we organized back in 2010, all that content, we filmed it and it's available on YouTube. Most of the content that we have been using is available on code repositories, so people are completely free after a bootcamp to go there and see it again. Pair programming, all the examples, etc. An important part of this, the social side. We try to always go to the pub and have dinner and that's it, and make people socialize with the other attendees of the workshop. And we think this is a very important part of it, because most of these people are starting their PhDs and they will be meeting each other in conferences, workshops throughout their academic careers. So, and they share lots of interests. So it's important that they know each other. Some not so good feedback, because there's a lot as well. Okay, the usual too warm, too cold, lack of coffee, I can relate to that. Overcrowded. So these are things that can more or less be controlled. The issues installing tools. We tell people to bring their own computers for several reasons. The most important of these reasons is because it's the setup they are used to and they are doing their research in their computers, so we want people to feel comfortable. We could be using a virtual machine, but I'm pretty sure they would use the virtual machine first thing after they arrive at home. The biggest problem is that no matter what the speed we use in a workshop, some people will always be complaining that we are going too fast, while some people will always be bored. And this is very difficult to deal with, and we are open to suggestions because we still don't know very well how to deal with this. We try to ask people what their expertise in terms of programming skills, or how they feel their programming skills are, but it can be misleading. So yes, does it work? Based on some surveys and some studies, small-scale studies that were done, people feel that they are learning. Most people will recommend the workshop to others. And also based on some tests that were done just before and after some workshops, it does increase computational understanding, and it does enhance some habits and routines in the way that people start learning about other tools that are industry-used standard tools. But we have many more questions than answers. And many people that attend the bootcamps find that it's really difficult to apply what is taught to their own work. That's why we try to do the audio-specific days. What happens if the bootcamps become mandatory? I know that the SSI, the Software Sustainability Institute, is getting these into the doctoral training programs in the UK. Are the students are they going to keep being motivated to attend? Because all of the attendees are usually volunteers, so are people still going to be motivated? And can we actually say that this is working? Because it's really nice to ask to people in the end of a workshop, did you enjoy? And everyone is going to say yes. More importantly, are scientists becoming more productive? Because that is the most important thing. This is the main reason why we are doing this. And we would also love to be able to answer the question, are scientists sharing more code because of this? Because in the beginning it was the reason why we started working with software carpentry. And yes, thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so we've got time for a couple of questions.
How did you decide on what was going to be taught in the boot camps? Did you conduct any kind of questionnaires or surveys of people that would be attending? And the typical tools that they were using or were planning to use for their research? Or was it?
So in the first iteration, in the first autumn school in 2010, as far as I can recall, I don't think we we asked. I think we asked people what they were using, but we went for a very generic workshop model. So I think we basically told Greg more what we didn't want than what we wanted. So I don't know if he thought about teaching HTML or... So there were some modules, and we kind of cherry-picked the modules that we thought could be more interesting, but without trying to be more specific, very specific.
Any more questions? So I'm just going to pick up on the point that Louis said about the software carpentry course being included in the doctoral training centres. So for those of you that don't know what's going on here, EPSRC Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council are in the process of calling for doctoral training centres, which they're likely to be about 80 awarded this year, that will train 10 or so PhD students a year for 5 years. We've had one of them here in Media and Arts Technology, and the Software Sustainability Institute have got one of the sections in the appendix of that, which is basically saying you should include software carpentry as something that you train your PhD students to do in your doctoral training centre. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens to that as this model gets unrolled out as part of it. And essentially, the people writing the don't have to do anything. They just have to talk to the Software Sustainability Institute, who will say, put 20k in your bid for software carpentry, and we'll do it for you. So, I think for us, it feels really nice to have been at the beginning of this, and in our own little way, to have helped some of this happen. I think from the beginning. Okay. So, if no more questions, let's thank Louis again. Thank you very much.